Are you nervous?
No.
No? Okay.
I once gave a speech to a petrology conference, and there were 700 people in the audience.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah, but we prepared for weeks, and I had a glossy presentation with a lot of video in it.
Uh-huh.
So nobody looked at me. It worked out really well.
Okay.
Well, good evening and welcome to the 33rd finale of the S.O.M.O.S Summer Writer Series. And each series I like to feature some local writers, and tonight's our night. Well, I forgot to mention that my name is Jan Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of S.O.M.O.S. I had a method to my madness tonight in terms of choosing the order of reading, because we start with someone very uplifting, and we're going to end with a message that's very uplifting of healing and transformation. But in the middle, we're going to the dregs. And in my opinion, novelist Scott Archer Jones is one of the best writers I know that can, in a very honest and real and ironically sympathetic way, write about drug dealers and addicts and pedophiles, and the list goes on and on and on. So, Scott, I believe you've written 7 novels, is that right?
They're not all finished.
Well, no. You've written 7 novels, right? And he has published 3. The first one, Jupiter and Gilgamesh. The second, The Big Wheel. And the third, which he's going to read from tonight, which will be published, I believe, sometime later this year.
Oh, no, it's out.
Oh, it's out now. Okay. It's called A Rising Tide of People Swept Away. It does not take place in New Orleans, though. It takes place in the Bosque in Albuquerque. And some of its memorable characters include GMR, the runaway boy, standing for Gerald Matthew Roger Whittington. And that's one of the ways to make a character really memorable. This poor boy has almost nothing except for the people of the bar who help take care of him, but he's got a whopper of a name. The bar harbors him in the Bosque, in a multiracial, poor neighborhood. Scott has the talent of filling his novel with humor and quirky but authentic characters with names like Rip, Red Donnie, 10, short for Tennyson, don't you know, Lavinia, full of evangelical Christians, sexual predators, autodidacts, and drug addicts. However, he gives them sparkling dialogue, true life grit, and a style that renders quietly desperate lives in a sympathetic light. He narrates his tragic story with heavy dosages of reality. Let's welcome Scott Archer Jones.
So the elevator talk for this book is a kid running away from a terribly dysfunctional family, but he doesn't run very far. He runs across the alley to a bar full of people that are nearly as broken as his own family, but less vicious. And there's a subplot that runs through the whole thing. This is a neighborhood in Albuquerque. I had to move it back about 10 years to 2009, actually. Because the neighborhood's getting very gentrified. It used to be a horrible, dangerous place to live. The Bosque is between 2nd and 6th Street, sandwiched in between all the industrial buildings near the freeway and the horse ranches, these gazillion-dollar horse ranches right along the river. And the city, and this has actually been in the planning and been torn down before in Albuquerque, would like to have more bridges over the Rio Grande so that we all can get to great shopping on the other side of the river. And so the neighborhood's threatened with a 6-lane bridge that's about to power right through it. And of course the neighborhood's chosen because there's no political backlash picking on a neighborhood like this. So GMR, by the way, loves his full name because it's pretty much the only thing he has. So I'm going to start in the front of the book. Slap in the middle of the Albuquerque Strip Shopping Center, Rip's Bar and Packaged Liquor Store dominated its accidental sagging skyline. First of all, it stacked up a full 2 stories, while the other places squatted on the street as 1-story nests of cinder block. Second, it had a 50s front made of narrow blonde stone, forming a planter and a wall that carried a ribbon window above chest height. The window ran black against the facade, but 3 beer signs glimmered through the glass dimly during the day and brightly at night. Rip's did not resemble the village center. It did resemble one of Albuquerque's lost souls. Across the street, a small boy came pounding around the corner of the thrift store. He was dressed in a torn t-shirt and shorts, dingy socks, and cheap sneakers. With a huff, he threw himself under the table out in front of the thrift. He scuttled back against the wall of the store, sucked himself into a ball, and tried to breathe slowly. He could hear running footsteps. Staring sideways, back the way he came, he saw cargo shorts, tan legs, 2 large, expensive athletic shoes. They stopped right in front of him. Stuffed under the large flat deck of the table, he held his breath. His view of the legs cut off at the thighs. He saw the toes point right, then scuff around to the left. They faced across the street. With a gritty sound on the pavement, they came full around and pointed at him. He held his breath. He heard the curse, Chingado. One of the feet kicked a rock down the street, and the shoes scuffed off. He waited as long as he could, and then, only then, let out a long, ragged breath. He eased himself up to the front of the table so that he could scan up and down the street. He would wait here. The strip smelled of trouble, filled of stores that wobbled on the edge of bankruptcy. It had always been in trouble, though, and the locals reacted to their impending financial failures with fatalism that matched the overall seediness of the storefronts. First on the right crouched the Cut and Curl, a hairdresser's, with a cheery window hung with pink shears and a regular house door freighted with sleigh bells. The awning overhead missed most of its edging and now sagged alarmingly. Across the way, the boy contemplated the heads that moved back and forth inside the Curl. He was dark and as dusty as the straggly tree hanging over the street in front of him, a tree that erupted from a 2-foot square of litter and cigarette butts. His gaze shifted to the left, to the next store. Bob's taxidermy leaned up shoulder to shoulder with Cut and Curl. Bob's glass had once been painted in child's tempera, with an elk poised above a cliff and surrounded by dwarfish conifers. The paint had long since started dropping to the floor inside as dust, and the elk had developed a mange of transparency. Bob himself often stared out through the withers of the beast, waiting. The boy didn't like Bob, but he did like the elk. The store also owned a combination locksmith and Christian bookstore establishment, Key to the Heaven, and a taco stand, Julio's Taqueria, a pawn shop, Enchanted Valley Cash for You, squatted by a bails bondsman known as Soulful. Soulful had titled his place AAA Slammer Relief and hung his windows with stout bars that showed the rusting permanence of an old state penitentiary. Irony ran up and down the street, laughing dark under the New Mexico sun, but the boy didn't feel it. He felt hungry. Crawling out from under the table, the boy drew his arms back into the body of his oversized t-shirt, leaving the sleeves flapping, and wiggled his shoulders back and forth. He crossed the street, went down a narrow opening between the bail bond office and the pawn shop. Appearing armless, he ricocheted down the 2 walls to the dumpster at the back. So that's the first time that we see GMR. GMR's mother is Mexican and his father is Arkansas white, by the way. So the kids are really messed up. So I mentioned in the first scene, which tries to give you a sense of this little village buried in the middle of the bosque, a taxidermist shop. Well, the taxidermist is named Bob Dobble. And he can't really make a living stuffing animals. He makes a living processing game illegally in the back And of course, he's never had a visit from the city that didn't result in tickets or an arrest. He also has anger management problems. And in this particular scene, he's one of the activists that's trying to save this little neighborhood from the bridge. And it's not going well at all. They've had a meeting with the councilman that just basically removed most of their hope. So I'll start with him. The taxidermist, his face is collapsed into lines of discontent and as gray as a fog, popped open the trunk of his car. The tarp lay in folds as he left it. He twitched one corner back, saw the delicate nose of the doe, the dark, staring eye now clouded with death. With a continuous litany of grunts, Bob Dobble forced his arms under the deer and the tarp below, got her up in his arms, and staggered in the back door of his taxidermy shop. Once there, he gutted the animal and poured her entrails into a large trash can. Using knives and a saw, he roughly quartered her and stacked her inside a refrigerator without shelves. Returning to his car, he stared down into the trunk. A quart of blood had seeped from his tarp and congealed on the nappy pad that lined the space. A sigh like a deflating beach ball escaped him. This had happened before. He knew what to do. He dropped a garden hose into the trunk, turned the bib full on, and ran water for 5 minutes. The water ran out through his rusty fenders onto the ground. At first the clotted chocolate color, and then the brick red, then the rosy tints that only hinted of life. He turned off the hose and threw it up against the back wall. He banged the trunk shut, dropped into the driver's seat, and slammed the door. Twisting the key, Bob made the old V8 roar, and staring behind him, shifted into first gear. Jamming the accelerator down, he leapt forward rather than back, peering hard the wrong direction. The car smashed into a dumpster and the left headlight disintegrated, folding its chrome eyebrow down onto the front of the fender. Shit, goddamn, shit. He jammed the transmission into reverse and hurtled backwards into the next door's concrete steps. The chrome bumper folded down almost to the ground. The impact snapped his neck back. He shrieked, a wordless howl of rage. He jammed the car into drive, floored it, and sprang forward, twisting the steering wheel. His mangled left fender caught the dumpster, rocketed it out into the alley with the car, and guided the rusty green trash bin down the auto's side. As it came even with Bob himself, the dumpster ripped off the side view mirror and shattered the rolled-up window. Bob kept going. Careening down the alley, he gripped the wheel so hard it should have fractured. His screaming rose to a higher pitch. Bastards, bastards, bastards. The power pole stopped the car dead, threw him out across the hood, and rather gently draped its wires down across the car, across the dirt alley, across the triumphant dumpster. Now, I'd like to read a little sequence. Like I said, everybody in the neighborhood bears some concern for this child, and some of them are trying to do something about it. And I want to read a little section that shows how the women in the neighborhood are stepping up. So the scene is, we're in Rip's Bar and Grill. It's Friday night. It's getting to be kind of mid-evening. And there are 4 women at the end of the bar. They're playing a card game because Rip's is as much a community center as it is an alcoholic establishment. So there are 4 women here. One is named Susan, and she's an immigrant from Appalachia who thought that she was going to make it rich in Albuquerque and is now living in the Bosque. You should picture her as black with spiky hair, wearing a white beater t-shirt under a flannel shirt. There's a woman named Regina who populates the book by Rips is her second job. She works off the books at Rips as a bartender, mostly during lunch. There's Lavinia, who's 70 years old and is Ten's brother. And turns out, and this is something that's not in the books, now you know something that the readers won't, she's partial owner, silent partner in Rips. And she's the moralist, and she's also the most religious. And then there's a woman named Rhonda, who's committing adultery with Julio. Both of them are stuck in marriages, her because of her children and him because he's Catholic. And so they're my adulterers in the book. So, Susan, Regina, Lavinia, and Rhonda made up a foursome, shuffling the deck and snapping the cards down onto the counter. The game was slap, no skill and all chance. Regina led off with the card and the conversation. Have you seen the dumpster boy lately, GMR? Rhonda shook her dyed blonde hair. Can't say that I have or haven't. He could be any of the kids who run loose during the summer. What do you mean, said Lavinia. Oh, t-shirts and shorts, sneakers, dirty. Regina snorted, hiding in the corners, eating whatever junk they want, never coming when their mamas called. Rhonda agreed with the rant. Yeah, see, he's just like our kids. Lavinia pursed her mouth up, showing her age in the vertical wrinkles of her upper lip. But he's always alone, and he doesn't wear the baggy shorts, and he doesn't have his thumbs on the phone texting. Rhonda nodded. Life must be simpler for GMR. Lavinia said, simple but not acceptable. The cards dealt out and dealt out again before Regina returned to her theme. I've been feeding him. She arched her eyebrows, creased her satin black forehead. The other three chorused, really? Oh yeah, we got a warm personal regard for each other. It's based upon a mutual love of cheeseburgers. So how does this happen, asked Lavinia. I bring his burger over to Rip's. We sit on the back step and I watch him wolf it down in 30 seconds flat. I may have to splurge for 2 burgers and kick in more fries. The boy has a hole where he should have a stomach. Could get expensive. Does he talk much? Lavinia asked. Not much, but he's polite. Smells, though. I hadn't thought of that, said Rhonda. Well, he's not going home to take a bath, is he? Susan scratched her spiky hair. Do you know where he sleeps? Not me, replied Regina. Maybe we could track him by the smell. Rhonda flipped out her last card. Believe I take this hand? Lavinia dashed off to open a beer for a customer, and when she returned, the cards had been shared out. The game began again. Susan said, I can get him a shower. You all know I work dispatch for the big plumbing company. Which one? Lavinia asked. Ace Riley and Sons. It's a ways over on Masthead. Do you like it? As well as anything, but that's not why I brung it up. We got a locker room for the guys with showers. No wonder in that, replied Regina. Plumber can get into some nasty shit. There's even a ladies' shower. Of course, I'm the only girl there, and I just pee. I don't actually shower at work. Regina flipped out her last card onto the pile and cocked her head to the side. Where are you going with this, girlfriend? Let's see if we can sneak the boy in and out, get him cleaned up. He could lock himself in the ladies. Rhonda said, more likely to sneak into a plumber shop than to follow any of us into our homes. Well, that's true. He's a runner. Regina stuck her hand into her hair. Tell you what, she nodded at Susan. You come over here Tuesday at noon. I'll introduce you and you can make your pitch. Final thing is, kids living on the street are not same as age as the kids that we see in the schools. They get smart, they get quick, they get very clever. So I want to read a segment that shows how GMR is coping with his life. Right at dawn, GMR tiptoed onto the back porch, crouching a bit as he did so. He raised his head enough to peer in the back door through the fly-spattered glass. His gaze made out a woman in a chair, her back to him and her head down on the table. With his mother in tienda asleep in the kitchen, he couldn't get in that way. The boy tried the front door next. He removed a key from under a rock and noticed the door yawned open. He tipped his head, inched it in between the frame and the scratched, chipped door, and peered into the living room. A man curled up on the couch, snorted on the inhale, and whistled on the exhale. It wasn't GMR's father. Someone had left a dusty lawnmower at the corner of the house. He wheeled it around the side and over to a window, scraping the house a bit and pausing to see if anyone heard. When no face appeared at the window, he crawled up on the mower and carefully forced up the sash. With a lunge, he got his chest up on the sill and slithered headfirst into the room. The room held 4 beds. He landed on the floor between 2 of them. Amy, little sister, lay in the bed to the right. He peered at her asleep there and decided she didn't look any thinner than the last time he had seen her. Her stuffed bear was on the floor. He grabbed it by the arm and nestled it on the bed by her hand. In the bed to his left sprawled his older sister, Juanita. She had gone to sleep in her makeup and had smeared tracks across the pillow. The smudges on her face and the open mouth made her appear younger than Amy. Bud lay in a 3rd bed. GMR stayed as far away as he could from the 15-year-old. He shied away, not turning his back on Bud. The 4th bed had been his. All the stuff piled on it proved his brother and sisters knew he was gone. He crept through the room, spotted the crumpled beer can that lay by Bud's bed, eased the bedroom door open and snuck down the hall, past the open door of his parents' bedroom. When the boy slipped into the utility room, he swung the door shut, careful to tug up on the knob to avoid that horrible creak. Here the family had an extra refrigerator, a washer and a dryer, and 3 hampers. The boy first searched the fridge to see if it had anything he wanted. The only contents were beer and 3 bottles, vodka, margarita mix, and Irish cream that wasn't cream at all. He dug around in a hamper till he found some of his clothes, laundered but left in a tangle with those of all the others. He kicked off his shoes, stripped off what he wore, and tugged on the new wrinkled clothes, burying the dirty ones in a pile heaped on the floor. He paused in the door of the kitchen to spy on his mother in tienda. On this morning she was fully dressed, except for 1 shoe. Her face lay partially on a bag of chips, partially on the lid of a bean dip can. She snored softly, breathing easily. The bottle stood empty by her hand. Her zippered case hid in her lap. No chance to check the pantry or the refrigerator. His father was in no better shape than his mother. He sprawled across his bed in his jeans and t-shirt, boots still on. GMR's nose wrinkled. The sour smell of vomit permeated the still air, but he couldn't see the puddle. The boy decided he could escape out the front door rather than the window, so he slipped into the living room. The coffee table supported a mountain range of bottles and cans, but he guessed they didn't all come from a single night. The table also held an open cereal box, and the boy scooped that up, holding it against his chest. On the couch, the stranger spotted earlier continued to snore. A second man lay in a stuffed chair by the front door, close to the getaway path. GMR stared at this man, intent on easing past him. He slipped around the half-open door. That's when his foot struck a beer can. It leapt forward and caroomed off the wall, a table leg. The boy snatched the door shut behind him and sprinted down the front walk. He heard a shout behind him, "Hey, kid." So, I'll stop there.